Gasper, what are your Patriots thoughts at this hour? How do you feel about the team heading into San Francisco?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of interesting from the standpoint of Gerard Mayo and Alex Van Pelt. And just looking at what happened last night in that Thursday night game with Brian Daboll. And I know Brian Daboll is getting a lot of criticism for kicking the field goal, but that's not a very good team, and that's not a very good offensive team. And you know what he was able to do with Malik Neighbors? And I'm not saying Alex Van Pelt has a Malik Neighbors. He doesn't. But he was able to use a lot of pre-snap motion to free him up. In fact, if you look at Warren Sharp, Sharp Football Facts, he pointed out that Neighbors had 9 catches last night following pre-snap motion. That's the most in the next-gen stats era. So that's since 2018. And so my sort of thought here is just, I don't know. I mean, how do you guys think this Mayo AVP marriage is going?
Poorly. Tenuous.
And I think that there will be better options this offseason. So I just sort of look at this, and again, this is not based on no one's told me this. This is not based on information. I'm just sort of looking at the situation and reading between the lines of some of the things that Mayo says about areas they need to improve and who could be available, whether it's Daboll or Mike McCarthy or Nick Sirianni or somebody else. And I just don't know if this is meant to last.
So 2 things here. I'm definitely interested in this story. Give me an example of reading between the lines and, sensing what you're talking about here.
Well, Jimmy has a Mayo cut from earlier in the week that I sent. This was on Monday, and he was asked a specific question about them having problems with pressure through the B gap and unblock things and what they could do to try and remediate that.
Right, I know you had an early B gap pressure that got through, but I think most of the unblocked ones against the Jets were nickel safety and then a couple edge rushers on those boots. I mean, that seems to be problematic as well. Is there one solution, a couple solutions for that?
Well, just the boot play in particular. Sometimes you have protected boots and sometimes you have unprotected boots. And what I will say is, like, you're anticipating a player to do one thing and sometimes they change that up. And it goes back to those tendency breakers, those guys, all the other teams, they self-scout as well. So we just have to get better as a whole. Our screen game has to get better. We have to continue to run the ball and also, the intermediate passing. Got to do a better job with that.
Thoughts?
Yeah, so I just look at that, our screen game has to get better. That one stood out to me. And remember after the Seattle game, he talked about having to be able to push the ball down the field and diversify the offense. I just think that while it's a very challenging situation for Alex Van Pelt, he does not have a lot at his disposal. From a coaching standpoint, and Mayo coming up through the Belichick tree and the idea that you maximize what you have, and certainly that's what they did in the first game, and I think that's what they've done outside of the Jets game in terms of the defensive personnel. Do you think he looks at it and thinks they're maximizing what they can do? Or do you think he looks at it and thinks there are more sort of coaching points that can be done here, like what you saw with Daboll last night? And again, I know they don't have a Malik Neighbors. I get it. But you know what they do have with the Giants? A crappy QB and an offensive line that's not that great. In fact, going into the year, both Pro Football Focus and Warren Sharp said that offensive line, they projected that offensive line for the Giants to be the 32nd offensive line, the worst offensive line in the league. Now, they perform better than that, but part of that's that they have a legit left tackle in Andrew Thomas. But all you need to know about the Giants' offensive line is that their starting right tackle, is Patriots cast-off Jermaine Illuminor. That's what they're dealing with down there. And they're still able to throw the football and do some things and work around some of their personnel shortcomings in a way that I don't think AVP has been able to do so far.
I mean, I'm glad Chris mentioned last week, too, because really this is 2 weeks in a row where there's been a little dig in there at the offensive side of the ball. And let's not forget that Mayo referred to Van Pelt as the head coach of the offense. So, Mayo can sort of put it under his umbrella because he's the head coach. But to me, he's basically throwing Van Pelt under the bus the last 2 weeks.
Well, this is something that I mentioned on TV last night. Well, I think it's a good place to start in terms of how do they view Alex Van Pelt? Why is he here? Is he here because they ran out of options, couldn't land some of the other guys that they wanted, and at the last minute they had to just settle for someone that the GM is familiar with? Or is he the guy going forward? Is he like, okay, and where you start with that, and a simple place to ask is, what's his contract? Mm-hmm. Because I'm going to assume that everyone now on the Patriots is under a multi-year contract. Mayo's not signed for 1 year, and Covington and any of the guys that Mayo signed, I figure are under contract for multiple years. I would assume Elliott Wolf is under contract for multiple years too. I would assume. How about Alex Van Pelt? The reporting at the time was that he was still being paid by the Cleveland Browns, and at the time, meaning when he got the job. I think it was Burt. If it was someone else, then correct me if I'm wrong. But he was still under contract by the Cleveland Browns, just like McAdoo was still under contract or still being paid by the Carolina Panthers, I believe. So, did Alex Van Pelt get a new contract as part of coming on staff, like Covington? Does Covington and Van Pelt have a similar contract as coordinators going forward? 3-year contracts as coordinators.
Good question.
I mean, I would kind of start there. And if Van Pelt does not have a contract beyond this year, and he's just sort of playing out that Cleveland contract, I think that tells you right out of the chute before the thing even got started what they think. Do you know that he's an experiment or a holdover or just a bridge guy to get him to the next guy because they ran out of options or didn't want to pay for, they wanted Kaylee and they didn't meet his price apparently. So they weren't prepared to pay what they needed last year. So they have a bridge guy, and that, Chris, I would just start with the contract to the point where I said, I'm going to jump on a conference call and just ask him, which I regret saying. But, I mean, they seem very transparent down there. Their coordinator's available every week. I feels like, right? Are the coordinators available every week?
Yes.
So it's not an unreasonable question. But
I'll tell you, in some ways it makes the whole thing worse.
Totally.
And so, Chris, I guess this is my question. Let's say it is just the conclusion of his contract that he originally, or it's 1 year. Okay, they have him here for as long as they were going to be able to get him on Cleveland's dime. How do you feel about starting your rookie quarterback, 3rd pick in the draft, his career, with what is a temporary or interim offensive coordinator? If that is the case, isn't that horrible?
Yeah, that would certainly be less than ideal. I mean, there's no question about that. But I think this is a little bit of a shotgun marriage. You have to remember that Alex Van Pelt, his relationship is with Elliott Wolf, not really Mayo. And so this was a situation where in building this coaching staff, they were leaning on the connections that Elliott Wolf has. And they also, unlike Bill O'Brien, who really got one coach, Bill let him have one coach, Will Lawling, who I think was that one coach he had last year. Van Pelt's been able to build an offensive coaching staff that he wants, and with guys that he's coached with before, like T.C. McCartney and Scott Peters. So they really sort of leaned into his system and his coaching once they hired him. But this wasn't Mayo's top choice. And this wasn't even somebody that he knew. Now, obviously, he interviewed him, and I think that in that interview he was impressed and that they were able to be on the same page in terms of what the vision for the team was. But now as you're starting to go through the season, I just sort of wonder if they feel like, okay, we know you're dealing with two things can be true. Van Pelt is dealing with some real limitations in terms of the offensive personnel, real limitations that limit what he can do. But on the other hand, can you do more than what you're doing with what you have? And I think both those things can be true. I think he can do a little bit better and a little bit more. And he is dealing with some very serious limitations in terms of the personnel.
Do you think this is, in some respects, a big week for the Patriots in terms of what kind of season they're going to have or buy-in or, that sort of thing? First real adversity they faced feels like, coming off that Thursday night game, this thing could be heading the other direction. If it continues in that direction, is that a bad sign? If they straighten it out, even in defeat, is that a good sign? Do you put anything into this week?
I think how it looks in terms of the effort, they, even with the injuries, they're outmatched in terms of the talent level from San Francisco. And I feel like some people feel like they're catching San Francisco at a good time because of the injuries. I think they're catching them at a bad time. San Francisco is ornery, agitated. You're getting them at home. And this is a game that they need. They don't want to lose 3 straight. They don't want to fall to 1-3. So you want to get them in a situation where maybe you're the trap game and they're looking past you. Do you think they're looking past the Patriots after the last 2 weeks and after losing to 2 teams that people didn't really expect much from this year in the Vikings and the Rams? Do you think they're looking past the Patriots?
No.
I don't. So I do think it matters in terms of the effort that you get from the Patriots and what, we've been talking about this. The new thing in sports is vibes. Like, what are the vibes? If the vibes are they're trying hard and they come out early and hang, and then in the end they lose, let's say by 10 or 13 because they just don't have enough, I think that's good. I think the real game in terms of which way this thing goes isn't this week. It's next week against Miami, because that should be a beatable team, and that should be a winnable game in the division. And if you lose that one at home to Skylar Thompson or Tim Boyle or Huntley, that's bad. That's sending you, to me, into sort of a little bit of a tailspin. This one I think is a tough one for the Patriots. This is a tough spot in terms of when they're catching the 49ers and the level of motivation the 49ers have.
Who's your starting quarterback against Miami?
Oh, it's Jacoby Brissett still. Yeah. I'm sticking to this. They're aiming for the October 27th game against the Jets.
Okay.
I'm gonna stick with that.
The chatter's picked up though, don't you think?
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, the chatter has picked up, and I look at Ian Rappaport had something, I believe it was early this week. He had something where he was basically saying sooner rather than later. And that seems to be the new piece of the chatter that we're hearing is, he's going to play and it's going to be sooner rather than later. That seems to be the element that has maybe switched in the last, 10 days or so, is this idea of like, okay, yeah, he's going to play and it's going to be sooner rather. But that's so vague. I mean, what does that mean? Does that mean before November? Does that mean against the Dolphins next week? Only the Patriots truly know that. Only the decision makers, Gerard Mayo, Elliott Wolf, Ben McAdoo, Alex Van Pelt. I think those are the only people that really know in terms of what the plan is when they want to go to it. But as I think Murray's pointed out all along, astutely, this might not even be a decision they make. Jacoby Brissett could just not be able to complete a game, and I think May goes in. Based on what we saw against, I thought, I don't know how you guys felt, and I know we're more than a week past it. I thought they really shoehorned May into that Thursday night. I didn't see any need or reason to put him in that game, and I was not expecting that.
But yeah, I think they're leaving it up to circumstance. Well, just keep putting Brissett out there.
He's not going to make it.
There's only so much beating he can take, so now it's time for the kid.
If you like that clip, check out more videos from Felger and Mazz here. For more Patriots analysis and opinion, hit this playlist. And for all the latest from the Sports Hub, download the app at 985thesportshub.com.